My trauma happened in St. Mary's County. I want to get right to the meat of why I'm here to talk to you. Not all of my trauma happened here in St. Mary's County, but predominance did. And like that story in the Bible about the madman that walked among the tombs, when Jesus healed him, he begged Jesus, "Take me with you. You've changed my life. I want to follow you." And Jesus said, "No, you're going to stay right here. Because everybody that knew you back then, when you were enslaved and possessed and totally a mess, they're going to look at you and they're going to see what mighty things I have done."
Amen.
That's my story. If there's not someone in this room that knew me back then, it wouldn't be hard for you to ask anybody in this area about my family and they would know me. I was that godly family with the 10 kids and the godly apparel that didn't do this and didn't do that, who was married to a pastor that had secret horrible things that were going on in our home. I was the person that was abused as a child by several relatives. And as I went on, that abuse became forgotten because my parents ended up becoming missionaries, and I grew up serving others and living in a beautiful life as a missionary kid and married a pastor. And my abuse became forgotten. Now, I didn't come here actually today to talk about my story, but I wanted to give you just a little tidbit of who I am, just so that we can go on about the meat of why I'm here. So my story took me some very, very hard places. So first of all, though, I want to introduce you to who my family is now. Can I have the next slide? So that's me and my husband, the short guy. He took on 10 kids when he married me 4 years ago. Well, although my oldest is 34, so we only had 4 living at home. Only 4 at home by then.
I feel you.
So, go ahead. Those are my 10. They're doing so long farewell. I had to pair them up because I have more than 7. So that was fun. Go ahead. That's all of them. And my 2 stepkids, so now we're actually 12. We've got a whole dozen. They range from 35 down to 12. I did have 10 all by myself, one at a time, and live to tell about it. Go ahead. Those are my grandchildren. I have 6. And as far as I know, as of this moment, there are none on the way, but you never know. Go ahead. And my life is all about advocacy. I am all about using my past to affect the future. That's what I'm here for. I didn't serve in the military and save hundreds and lose an arm and get the Purple Heart. I didn't. But I am here to tell you today, this is a story of redemption, and when Jesus took me, I wasn't a drug abuser or the madman in the tombs that was demon-possessed. I was someone locked in a religious family that nobody knew what we were going through. And I was that mother and that wife that allowed myself to take his side even against my kids for a time. I stand before you confessing that to you. There are a lot of people still in that position, and I am here for the rest of my life. I will never be silent again. And that is what I will do until I die. So I come to you, I want to tell a little bit more about my story. And I've come to you with this topic today called the art of active healing. This is something that was created through my life the last years. It's not something I went out to make. It's something that was created. It was an art. Because that's what art is. It's when you take tools or an idea or even powder that's been crushed up in different colors and made into sticks, and you hand them to an artist and they make a beautiful mural. Or you can hand an artist tiles that are broken and they can make a beautiful mosaic. That's what art is. And I feel very burdened today that there's not enough active, not passive, but active taking place in your own healing. And I feel like I've come to you today, I'm going to say this and I hope you understand how I mean it, but with the right to say it, because I've been there. I also, before I really get into this, I want to tell you something about triggers. You're not alone, and if you've been through trauma, a day like today is going to be both healing and triggering, okay? Because as these people, I didn't get the privilege of hearing the other speakers, but as you hear my story, you're going to hear some things maybe you identify with or someone that you love identifies with, and it will possibly be triggering for you. I told you that as a child, I went through sexual abuse. I was also that mom, like I said, that for years, I knew that my husband was physically abusing my children. I didn't know about the sexual abuse. I was there. Oftentimes, it would be in the name of Jesus that they would get beaten. I would stand there, crushed, but I was also taught, and I pray that you hear how I mean this, I was taught that this type of abuse is often the cross that we must bear, and we must pray for our abuser, forgive and be submissive and honoring. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the fine line that we walk here, we are Bible-believing Christians, and I know the church that is hosting this is not into the error that I had, but I was in some really, really dark stuff in the name of God. It is such a, you know, to have abuse happening when someone is a complete unchristian and they're drunk and they're hurting their kids, but to have it in the name of Jesus, in the name of God, and have the church that you're in, or that belief system that you're in, support that, is just appalling. There again, I want to bring it back because that's not why I'm here. We all see the news, we all hear the stories, we've seen the CSI programs, we know about the bad stuff, okay? I'm here to tell you how to get out of that and what to do to move on. I'm going to read just a very short portion of one of the books that I've written. When life hands you a plate you didn't order, even the basic ins and outs of life can become a battle just to keep your head above water. Perhaps you can't even remember what trust and zest is. It's been so long since you've possessed either one. Or worse, you can't remember life before your trauma. Perhaps your abuse happened decades ago, and yet your heaviness lingers and you've noticed you're getting more traumatized about your past than ever before, especially after years of numbness or even decades of intentionally avoiding your memories, or perhaps you only recently remembered what happened to you. Questions are now bombarding you. Why can't I turn the corner? Why are the bad memories and nightmares getting worse? Does anybody, well, don't raise your hand, but you get this, right? With each survivor, no matter what our story is, there comes a time, a season of awakening and realization. Our pain becomes almost tangible. Angry questions like, what planet was I on? Why did I allow him or her to hurt me for so long? Why didn't I stand up for myself? Blah, 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 boil to the surface. In spite of this horrific upheaval, something wonderful is happening to you. Your body and your soul has decided you are now strong enough to confront this. This awakening hurts beyond words. And no wonder, when our eyes have been accustomed to the dark, the sun's brightness hurts. It makes us squint and want to run the other way. Now, that's just the very beginning of the book. So what's going on? Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters. Isaiah 55:1. Is it possible to find strength, peace, power, and joy during our healing and within the boiling pot of imperfection and pain? Do we have to wait until everything's better? Is there hope for people that have really hard issues to get through? Can we get past, and can we find our purpose and our thriving? I was diagnosed through all this with PTSD. There were years that the kids and I lived in people's basements. Their dad went to prison. This is hard for me, I'll be honest with you, telling this story right here in this county. This is where my abuse happened, and I speak internationally. I've spoken in Europe. I've spoken all the way out to California. But to come in my county, where my trauma happened, it stretches. It's stretching me, and I do it. I do it. But I'm just telling you this. When we go through trauma, you've known people that have had hard things. Maybe it's you still today. You go through a time of denial in a lot of ways, where perhaps it shows itself in different ways, but you're in shock. You can't process it. It's your body's way of protecting you. And it's a good thing that it doesn't all come back at you at once, because it probably put us in the hospital. I almost went there. There was there was a time that I had to scope a place on the outside to make sure I didn't know anybody, because I couldn't handle being there. I was an absolute mess. Because I had been abused, you would have thought I would have noticed the signs that my kids were being abused. I didn't see the signs. So when I found out, I was that mom that had that terrible thing happen that nobody ever wants to find out, that your children are being abused. You're not alone. Your reactions and feelings are normal. Your body has so many ways that it protects you. In our society, we're okay with talking about illnesses. My husband's a diabetic, so several years back when he found out that he had diabetes, it brought everything into perspective. He had had symptoms, and it's like, oh, now I get why I'm so thirsty, and all of these other things that he was dealing with. But in our society, you know, when he got that diagnosis, it didn't ruin his life. He went to the library and he got some books and he learned what he could do, dietary changes that he could make. And in some ways, he's more healthy now than he was before. But in our society, we don't really put as much credence on our emotional, spiritual, and mental trauma. And if we did, can you imagine if somebody had found out they have diabetes, but they're not allowed to talk about it, or it would upset someone? And oftentimes when someone's been abused and they do want to speak out, it disrupts a family, or it causes issues. And what if it wasn't okay to talk about your diabetes and you just had to kind of ignore it? You'd end up getting your feet amputated one day, right? So I'm asking you to take a different look, if you haven't already, to emotional and spiritual and mental trauma. And understand that it puts us back in the same way. We are spiritual people. We're body, soul, and spirit. And when our spirits aren't okay, our bodies aren't okay. And what's terrible is it's not okay not to be able to have help for that. We need to be able to have help for that. These things that happen to us as children, if you haven't heard of them, they can be called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, and they do affect our lives. It's not uncommon for someone like me, and I didn't know this, but someone that had been abused as a child, it's very common for people like that, for children to grow up and marry someone who is going to abuse them. I lived that. What's funny is when I was in that situation, I didn't even know I was living with DV. I didn't know about DV, domestic violence. I didn't understand that. I didn't know the acronym about CSA, child sexual abuse. I didn't know. I'm a different person now. So as we come out of this fog, I explained to you before that we can sometimes go years, and then something will trigger something that we've gone through, and it will put us back. We'll be almost like it's worse in our lives. We will be completely unsettled. I lived this. I told you I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was an absolute crazy woman for a while. Holding it together, living in people's basements, trying so hard, having social services in my life. It was a very traumatic situation. But over time, I was able to step back long enough to see myself differently. Go ahead. Perspective. Perspective changes. I said it changes everything. It doesn't really change everything, but it changes so much about what we're viewing. What is your identity? Is it the pain and the trauma? Has being a victim crowded out the you were meant to be? I lived that too. I was not put here in this world to be that victim. That's not what God intended for me. Do you all know the story about the crippled man at the pool? You've heard the story. I'm going to tell it to you really quick because there's something I want to bring out. He was by that pool for many, many years. Couldn't walk. And there was the story that the angel would come once a year and trouble the waters, and whoever could get in there really quick and get in the water, they would be healed. Jesus came up to him and he says, "Sir, do you want to be made well?" I love that. And his answer wasn't, yes, heal me. It was, I don't have anybody, it's impossible. I don't have anybody to get me to that water fast enough. So I guess I'm going to be a cripple the rest of my life. It's my identity. Nobody will help me. I've been given all these bad cards. Do you understand what I'm saying? And Jesus said, "Pick up your mat and walk." There it is right there. And that man leapt. And he did that. And I'm saying to you today that that person that I was, I didn't ask for those things. They were put on me. And now I have the choice for the rest of my life to take those things, take that story, and let God create something beautiful. And you know what? My story has made me compassionate and loving and understanding. And all of you out there, if you have a bad day, you're going to want to come talk to someone like me, not the person that's lived in the Barbie house. And you know what? She said, Jennifer said, I'm a title holder, but I want to tell you something about that. I got into that because I always want to use my voice for the rest of my life as loud as I can. But do you know when I put a crown and sash on my head doesn't change a thing, just like putting all that abuse on me that I had did not make me who I am today. But I'm telling you right now that those things that I went through I can use those just as much of a tool in my life right now as using the sash and the crown, because it doesn't make me a queen, but neither did that abuse and the bad decisions I made to stay with somebody and continue to be abused. I live with that still, but I'm telling you right now, there is no condemnation, and Jesus wants to take that, and he wants to use this story mightily right here in our county and to the ends of the earth. I'm asking you right now, if you're stuck in your victim, I just want to say that's not really the correct grammar, but if you're stuck in your victimology here, I've been there. Jesus doesn't want that for us, and that's not the end of the story. The worst thing is not that we've been through the abuse. The worst thing is that we allow it to continue to hurt the rest of our lives. Let's take it and let's use this art as a productive tool to let God change us and use us in the way he wants us to. Thanks so much for having me. Look me up on social media. Stop the Silence, Always a Voice. Jill Annette Short on Facebook. I would love to talk to you. I'm open. Call me, message me. I'm here. Thanks.